This is John Friedel, and you're watching GVTV News. So watch, and learn.
Thanks, John, and I'm Randy Hansen. In World News headlines today, Manning defers plea on WikiLeaks charges. And out of Syria, 13 shot dead in Hama. Annan named special envoy. And Syrian opposition meet with international diplomats in Tunis. And wounded British journalist pleads for help in Syria. Obama sends apology to Quran protests continuing in Afghanistan, and Obama touts energy policy and concern over speculators' role in gas prices. And Maryland Senate votes to legalize same-sex marriage. And a report says 25% more U.S. children now living in poor areas. And U.S. joins talks on North Korea disarmament. Venezuela President Chavez to return to Cuba for surgery. And Salvadoran general cleared for deportation over 1980 murders of U.S. nuns. And Lebanese citizen jailed in Iraq to face U.S. military commission. And Pentagon lawyer defends killing of U.S. citizens abroad. And 7 Marines die in Arizona helicopter collision. And Chicago workers occupy window factory site of 2008 action. And Occupy Philadelphia protesters acquitted of sit-in charges. And a report out NYPD employed snooping tactics for criminal organizations in Muslim spying. And Apple faces new protests for working conditions. GVTV News would like to say the views expressed on our news broadcast do not necessarily reflect the views of NCTV Digital Media Center. Unlike some news media, anyone can use any information on our news any way you want, and guess what? It's free. You do not have to subscribe to us for your daily news. But for these stories, GVTV News would like to thank one of our underwriters who supports your only visual video news media in Nevada County. That's right, it's us, GVTV News. In today's first world news story, accused U.S. Army whistleblower Private Bradley Manning was arraigned in a military court on Thursday on charges stemming from the alleged disclosure of classified material to WikiLeaks. Manning faces 22 charges, including aiding the enemy for allegedly downloading and passing on thousands of classified files that later appeared on the WikiLeaks website. Manning deferred his plea on all charges and also deferred his decision on whether to appear before a military judge or a military jury. A trial could come as late as August. And Syrian activists say at least 5 people have been killed in the besieged town of Homs after a week-long assault by Assad's regime continues. Activists in Hama, meanwhile, say forces rounded up and shot dead 13 men and boys from one family. The family had the same last name as the commander of the opposition group, Free Syrian Army, but it was unclear whether they were related. On Thursday, UN investigators filed a report naming top Syrian officials believed to have committed crimes against humanity. The United Nations also announced it has named former Secretary General Kofi Annan to act as Joint Special Envoy on Syria in conjunction with the Arab League. And the developments in Syria come as the members of the opposition Syrian National Council are holding talks with officials from more than 50 countries at Friends of Syria conference in Tunis. Attendees have expected to call for ceasefire to allow aid to countries' most violent areas. Syria's National Council delegate said last week that international recognition as well as further pressure of the Assad regime would help. And On the top of these decisions is the recognition of Syrian National Council as the representatives of Syrian people. Number 2 is to discuss the possibility of creating humanitarian passages into the crisis area, one of them Lebanon to Homs, and one from Turkey to Idlib, and one to Jordan to Daraa. A third topic of discussion is political process moving forward, where still a chance to rely on Assad resigning and transferring all his powers to his deputies or not. A British journalist wounded in shelling in Homs this week has pleaded for help in his attempt to flee Syria for treatment. In a video, Paul Conroy says he was hurt in the same attack that took the life of the war correspondent and U.S. native Marie Colvin. He said, "My name is Paul Conroy. I'm a photographer from Sunday Times. Today's date, 23rd February 2012. I was wounded in a rocket attack yesterday, 3 large wounds to my leg. My colleague Marie Colvin was also killed in the same attack. I'm currently being looked at after the Free Syrian Army medical staff who treated me with the best medical available. It's important to add that I am not here as a guest and not captured. Obviously, any assistance that can be given by government agencies would be welcome." Protests continue for the 4th straight day in Afghanistan over the burning copies of the Quran by the U.S. troops. Hundreds of protesters have marched from the palace of Afghan President Hamid Karzai in Kabul. At least 12 Afghans have died in the protests so far. 2 U.S. troops were also killed on Thursday when Afghan soldiers opened fire on a NATO base that had come under protest. Also Thursday, President Obama sent a letter to Karzai apologizing for the burning. President Obama took up the nation's soaring gas prices on Thursday in a speech devoted to touting his administration energy policy. Oh, he has one? Obama said the White House is working diligently to find a reduced cost of gas. He said, "I have directly looked at the administration to look for every single area where we can make an impact and help consumers in months ahead. From permitting to deliver bottlenecks to what's going on in the oil markets, we're going to look at every single aspect of the gas prices, and because we know the burden it's putting on consumers, we will be taking steps that we can't, whatever we can in the coming weeks, the short term over the long term, and all above energy strategy requires us to have the right priorities." And blah-de-blah-de-blah. In interview with ABC News, Bart Chilton, a commissioner at Commodity Futures Trading Commission, cited figures from Goldman Sachs showing large amounts of car owners' gas expenditures are going directly to Wall Street speculators who bet on oil prices. According to Chilton, drivers of a popular Ford pickup truck are paying an extra $14.56 per fill-up to speculators, or around $750 a year, according to widely cited estimates. Gas is now costing around $10 per barrel because of financial market speculation. Maryland State Senate has voted to legalize same-sex marriage as major Democratic Governor Martin O'Malley has promised to sign into law. Maryland will join 7 other states and districts of Columbia in allowing same-sex marriage. Opponents may attempt to bring Maryland law to a referendum on the November ballot. New figures show the number of U.S. children living in poor neighborhoods has increased 25% since the turn of the century. Annie E. Casey Foundation reported 8 million children living in poor communities in 2010, 1.6 million increase from 2000. In a reflection of the stagnating wages for most American workers, 3/4 of these children had at least one parent working a job. United Nations is taking part in preliminary talks in Beijing to convince North Korea to return to negotiations on nuclear disarmament. The 6-party talks also include South Korea, China, Japan, and Russia. The U.S. nuclear envoy for North Korea, Glenn Davies, said the talks are in early stages. She said, "We are going to try to make as much progress as we can. Diplomacy is, as you know, it's a difficult process. It takes time. Sometimes it takes weeks, months, years. And if we can get far enough, we can get something that then we can build on. That's important. That's an important thing." Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez is returning to Cuba to undergo a new round of cancer surgery after 2 operations last year. Chavez said he had lesions removed and will be gone indefinitely. A former El Salvador defense minister accused of murder and torture has been cleared for deportation from the United States. In a landmark decision, a Florida immigration judge ruled Thursday that General Carlos Ingenio Vides Casanova can be sent back to El Salvador for his role in the notorious killings of 4 U.S. churchwomen in 1980. It was the first time an immigration judge has ruled a top-ranking foreign military leader can be deported for committing abuses under the 2004 law intended to bar human rights violators from U.S. soil. This is the first time that General Vides has been held responsible for the churchwoman's death in the court of law. General Vides was a close U.S. government ally during his stint in as defense minister in the Salvadoran junta between the '83 and some other date. Among them was responsible for the deaths. Among them was Bill Ford, who waged a long-term battle for justice in the murder of his sister, Ida Ford. Before his death in 2008, in response to the ruling, Bill Ford's son, Bill Ford Jr., said, "Since the women were killed, my father made this the single purpose of his life. I'm sure he knows and is well pleased that General Vides may no longer be able to live in this country to enjoy the fruits of his brutality." White House has authorized military commission charges against Lebanese citizens accused of involvement in the killing of the U.S. troops in Iraq. According to New York Times, the defendant Ali Musa Dagduk is the first to be charged under the current military commission system, who is not accused of being part of the so-called war on terror against al-Qaeda. He would also be the first to be charged under the military commission system who is not held in Guantanamo Bay. U.S. officials are seeking to negotiate an extradition from Iraq. The New York Times reports the White House has kept the Dagduk's case secret, omitting it from public lists and military commissions. And a top Pentagon lawyer has openly declared the administration claimed to free rein on assassinating U.S. citizens who joined al-Qaeda without court review. In a speech in Yale Law, Jay Johnson, the Pentagon General Counsel, said courts should have no role in reviewing presidential decisions on who can be targeted. Belligerents who also happen to be U.S. citizens do not enjoy immunity where non-citizens belligerents are valid military objectives. Johnson appeared to be referring to the case of U.S.-born Anwar al-Awlaki, we just pictured, who was killed in a U.S. drone strike last year. Awlaki's 16-year-old son was also killed 2 weeks later. 7 U.S. Marines died on Thursday when their helicopter collided during a training mission in Arizona desert. The Marines are known to frequently use an area to train for nighttime missions in Afghanistan. And a Chicago window factory was occupied by workers in 2008 is now facing a second occupation by some of the same employees. About 65 workers of the Goose Island plant run by Sirius Energy have occupied the factory in an attempt to save their jobs after the company announced plans to close the plant and consolidate its operations. In 2008, some of the same workers were involved in a famous 6-day sit-in after Republic Windows and Doors gave workers just 3 days' notice before closing the factory. The sit-in drew national attention. The union workers reached a settlement, and they each received $6,000. 10 members of Occupy Philadelphia have been acquitted on charges of obstructing a highway during a sit-in last year outside the city's police headquarters. Their case marked the first full courtroom trial for Occupy Philadelphia protesters. And new details have emerged on New York City's police department spying on Muslim residents across the Northeast. Associated Press reported the NYPD targeted Muslim mosques with tactics normally reserved for criminal organizations, including collecting the license plates of worshippers, monitoring them in surveillance cameras, and cataloging sermons through a network of informants. The disclosure followed the news this week. NYPD agents monitored mosques and Muslim businesses in Newark, New Jersey, unbeknownst to the local officials. And the tech giant Apple is facing a new wave of protests over conditions on the Foxconn factory in China, where some of the products are made. Protesters gathered outside the meeting of Apple shareholders in California Thursday, calling for better working conditions. Benazir Vohra said, "I would really love it if Apple would produce their products in a way that they're more aligned with my values. I really don't think this is in order to make a good enough profit and make a high-quality product. They need to use the chemicals that they do. I don't believe that they have to exploit workers the way they do with overtime and low wages." Heidi Perlmutter said, "We're here because we cannot stand the conditions that these phones are built under. We are working people ourselves, and we think that people deserve a good salary and they deserve special safe conditions." And that's it for World News today. Now another thanks to one of our underwriters who supports your only visual video news media in Nevada County. That's right, it's us, GVTV News.
Soundcheck Music Center, the rock and roll connection. We have guitars, amps, drum equipment, sound accessories, lessons, and repairs. We are located at 671 Maltman Drive, Grass Valley. 530-272-7236, open 7 days a week.
No one needs anyone, they don't even just pretend. John is an American. I'm afraid of Americans. I'm afraid of the world. I'm afraid I can't help it. I'm afraid I can't. I'm afraid of Americans. I'm afraid of the world. I'm afraid I can't help it.
That's right, it's time for the police blotter, and pictures in the blotter not from these actual events, but used for visual aid only. Grass Valley Police Department on Wednesday, 7:36 a.m. A caller from 300 block of 1st Street reported transients living under a house. No one was located. 9:47 a.m. a woman from 1400 block of Sedgeworth Way reported a man spraying Gatorade all over her car. He was arrested on suspicion of trespassing and violating a restraining order. 10:23 a.m. a caller from 800 block of West Main Street reported a man and a woman smoking drugs who could not be located. 12:49 p.m. a caller from 200 block of Sierra College Drive reported receiving a counterfeit $100 bill. And 1:20 p.m. a caller from 200 block of South Church Street reported men smoking drugs. No drugs were found. 1:45 p.m. a caller from East Main Street reported a man and a woman in a physical fight. She was beating him up. And 4:52 p.m. a caller from 800 block of Sutton Way reported a man possibly smoking drugs who was arrested on unknown charges. 5:02 p.m. a woman from 100 block of Neal Street reported someone punched a light out on her rental vehicle. And 6:03 p.m. a woman cited on suspicion of shoplifting in the 100 block of West McKnight Way. And Thursday, 3:58 a.m. a caller reported a person possibly selling marijuana. And Nevada County Sheriff's Office on Wednesday, 9:26 a.m. a caller from 16,000 block of Glecko Road reported the theft of a package from a mailbox. At 9:39 a.m. a woman from 11,000 block of Lakeshore North reported her neighbor tried to run her over with a golf cart. At 12:09 p.m. a caller from 24,000 block of Oro Valley Road reported a vehicle burglary. And 12:53 p.m. a caller from Scotts Flats Road reported a Jeep wagon sped out of the area with a woman screaming for help. It could not be located. A be on the lookout advisory was issued. And 2:24 p.m. a caller from 18,000 block of Easy Street reported vandalism. At 3:20 p.m. a person from Court Holding reported having been shot at Gracie Road. No shooting was found to have occurred. 4:14 p.m. a man from 14,000 block of Harder Place reported people tried to get into his cabin. 4:45 p.m. a woman from 14,000 block of Rough and Ready Highway reported her boyfriend went to confront someone and the person tried to hit him. Gee, wonder why. 5:05 p.m. a woman from 21,000 block of Hyatt Road reported hearing a bullet ricochet off a tree. At 7:22 p.m. a caller from 12,000 block of Gale Lane reported residential burglary. And Thursday, 2:06 a.m. a caller from Red Dog Road reported a person with a large amount of drugs. And 4:17 a.m. a caller from Ridge Road and Pear Orchard Way reported two adults walking with a child in a grocery bag. The child was okay. And that's it for the blotter today. Now another thanks to one of our underwriters who, you guessed it, supports your only visual video news media in Nevada County, us. In today's local news headlines, man arrested twice in 3 days. And fight between roommates ends in arrest. And Meckler resigns from National Tea Party Patriots. And Nevada City picks new police chief. In a story written by Liz Keller of the Union, Grass Valley police officers arrested a man for a second time in 3 days after he was released from jail and showed up at the station to pick up his belongings, allegedly with methamphetamine in his pocket. Samuel Lerma Gage, 19, initially was arrested during a traffic stop early Monday morning after being found with a loaded firearm, said Captain Rex Marks. Lerma Gage was a passenger in a vehicle which was stopped on the 400 block of East Main Street. During a pat-down, he was found to have an FN-57, a semi-automatic pistol, a gun specifically made to fire armor-piercing cartridges and for law enforcement and military purchase only. The only purpose for that gun is to kill cops, Mark said. Lerma Gage also allegedly had a full magazine of rounds. The gun was confiscated. Lerma Gage was booked into county jail on suspicion of being an ex-felon with a firearm. Lerma Gage was released with $11,500 bail and went to the police department Wednesday to retrieve his belongings. But because GVPD had discovered the gun that had stolen in the recent Sacramento County burglary, Lerma Gage was charged with possession of stolen property, Mark said. He had meth in his pockets. Who comes to the police station with drugs in their person? Lerma Gage then also was charged with possession of controlled substance and committing a felony while on bail, booked and released on a $25,000 bail. Wow. And another Liz Keller story. A Nevada City man ended up in county jail on battery charges after allegedly attacking his roommate Friday morning. Randall Marshall Dillon called 911 just before 1 a.m. to report he had a drug dealer in his house in 13,000 block of Red Dog Road and he was going to take care of the problem. According to dispatch reports, he then called back to say he had messed him up. Nevada County Sheriff deputies responded to find the roommate, who was not being identified, with his face, hair, and clothes covered in blood, said Sheriff Keith Royal. He was transported to Sierra Nevada Memorial Hospital. Dillon had been drinking and was extremely agitated. Royal said he allegedly told deputies that the victim had been his roommate for about 3 weeks, but that he wanted him out because he had large quantities of marijuana and other illegal drugs in his closet. Dillon said his roommate, along with another man, attacked him and threatened him with violence, and that he headbutted his roommate. The second man, who also was not being identified, had left the residence but returned later. He reportedly sustained injuries, but further information was not available. The primary victim told deputies that Dillon was listening to loud music in his room and that he had asked him to turn it down. Dillon then allegedly came out of his room swinging and began punching the victim in the face and head. Victim told deputies he fell to the ground in a fetal position and Dillon began kicking him in the head. Dillon was booked on suspicion of battery and violating probation and was being held in lieu of a $15,750 bail. In a story by Christopher Rosacker of the Union, Mark Meckler, co-founder of the National Tea Party Patriots and the Grass Valley Residents, has tendered his resignation to the group's board of directors. I've repeatedly expressed over a long period of time my discomfort with the way the financial affairs of the TPP have been handled, and that I believe that the TPP is fiscally irresponsible in the ways that it spends and manages donor monies. Meckler wrote in a letter addressed to Ernest Istuk and other members of the Tea Party Patriots board, and we're talking about the national board, not the local one. It is clear that I no longer have any viable input in the direction of the organization, either whatever. And as treasurer, I have been excluded from distribution of critical financial information and critical discussions about the finances of the organization. Meckler expressed regret over his inability to funnel the substantial fundraising infrastructure of the national TPP back down to the hundreds of local Tea Party organizations. As we have raised more and more money and now into the many millions of dollars, only a very small and insignificant portion of these funds are directed to the grassroots on the ground, Meckler wrote in his severance letter. Mark Meckler's resignation as an employee and the Tea Party Patriots board follows months of discussion and good faith differences on how best TPP can serve the